Yeah. Regularity. I find that we usually report because at the end of the year, when you look at the annual report, the government department does not go back to the people pay. So we've not done that.
Yeah.
And when we cry about technology, and I have an issue with CETA myself, technology can assist us to do that. Because when you load those outputs in a website enabled by digital analytics, you can get some insights in terms of what is happening on the ground. A lot of work that is being done in government, but we have not been going back to communities to check. Because you don't always realize impact at the goal. Some of the projects take time for impact to be realized. So say that it goes back to how technology can be an enabler for us to do that. So SDP is structured, it's very evident that there's a desire to create a form of South Africa, a South Africa type. But we're not always able to measure the progress that towards it that is South Africa. Technology can be an enabler for us to start to enhance the way we measure progress.
I want to double click on what you're saying a little bit. You're saying that you believe or the potential of technology to help you measure impact and outcomes better. Take us into your confidence as DPME and as the DG. What are the steps you are taking to that space where we really monitor not just activities, but outcomes and impact?
Quick example. We sit with the and HOD, their and annual as we do that of ministers. We used to always know the kind of trends, year out, and also areas where we are slowing down in terms of performance. Now, to get warm bodies to do that be a very big challenge for me. So I can tell you that I know that the HODs, DGs, and provinces are being assessed on annual basis. But you need much more than the administrative part. Ask a question. Are South Africans getting value for money? If this is a trend in terms of the performance of the DGs, how does it relate to the performance of departments? So I'm looking more in how would that, so that it's not just merely a tick box exercise. And in this regard, I've been negative years to say, give us a platform that we can use so that we can track all over a period, so that we can go back to South Africans and say, this is the state of performance and this is how it relates to the performance of government. And this is how it relates to 3 years down the line. I still don't have that platform, and I wish to believe that the people who have seated here could have done that. We are worried about a department like mine, which is not a big technology hitter in terms of our youth, about the big departments that really need technology. So if you can help us, and it's whether CETA can help the big department, to move. So the long and short of it is that we know what we're doing, but we accept our limitations as government. Ones who are chasing after CETA so that it can engage people who are seated here to make life easier for us. If CETA was to do everything that DGs are asking for today with the money that is available, year will be busy.
An interesting challenge.
Yes, you will be busy.
Challenge.
We want to do. We have resources, little as that can be, but we need a sitter that is lead, sitter that is innovative. The sitter that wows the DGs to say, wow, is this possible? So we have, I'm talking about the money that is currently allocated. I'm not talking about new money. We can do quite a lot with the.
Thank you, Doctor. Do you want to add to this topic?
DG is 100% correct.
Yeah.
From what I've seen, there's no accounting officer today in this government that is saying, in fact, they are all screaming at us to say, where is the technology? Why are we not seeing the impact that we are seeing in the private sector or in some areas of government where there is an improvement? And I think we've got to, today, I think, is to scratch beneath the surface and try and understand what is the problem. Why are we not able, we have funding available, we are spending money, why are we not seeing that impact? For something is some performance of whether it's HODs or ordinary public servants. And I think this, in unpacking those challenges and we come back down to this issue of one I call capacity and linked to that skills. I guess we're going to have some further conversations around it, but I think the issue of capacity in government for those traditional that need to deploy those technologies, DG and colleagues, is where we need to have a conversation about whether we have the right people in place and whether we need to invest heavily on the right people so that our partners across the board, with solutions, we're able to understand it, we're able to interpret it, we're able to support it in order to be successful.
You're saying that ultimately it's clear that government departments are aware of the role in accelerating service delivery. And there is a need to therefore to meet the demands of the different public service entities in order to deliver of technology for each of these areas. So let's talk a bit about this. At the very beginning, Dr. something around innovation and the procurement of innovation services. How do you see the challenge of procuring for innovation within the public sector playing out? What are some of the challenges you're facing? And from your perspective, perhaps you have some ideas of bringing in.
Okay. Look to me for ourselves. Let's take, for an example, the appointment in the IT. The rules currently will say you should have worked in the public sector for this number of years. So young people who have never worked in government, but they are crazy about technology. Not because they are not like us. So it's as if we're creating jobs for ourselves. Those of us who are already inside. Example of something you don't need. In the world of technology, we need to do away with that so that we can also encourage people who are not like us, but they are quite innovative. So it's one is the rules and allow young people to enter the government space without them even had to director, deputy director, director, chief director, DDG, all those levels to play in a technology space because things are happening very fast. So we are ourselves. Because the things that we're complaining about are all man-made, kind of issue. The one other area management we had last week is instability of governance. If we were to run a sustainable technology program, we need stability in governance, particularly at SETA. Water last week, and we find that one of the success reasons why Rainwater has been is because the current CEO, Sipomusai, was COO for 10 years before he became a CEO. So rainwater has been very stable compared to SETA. And what we are doing currently is run the two models and say, for instance, why is it that people are afraid to go at, sorry for my lingo, at SETA but not at rainwater? Is afraid of disrupting water because when that happens, then we're all gone. So, but we see that is something else. So I'm trying now to do an analysis of why is it that we have this kind of instability when it comes to SETA. With rainwater, find that things are a bit different. There is some stability in that. So I'm bringing the issue of governance. That is a very important input that we need to think about, because you create two institutions observed, public works and SETA, that are procurement entities. Maybe by their very nature, this kind of interests that lead to corruption and rent seeking. And maybe it's time we run these two entities because they are very unique entities. All of us are forced to go through these entities. We have done some comparison of what is happening with the two entities, and we found that in the way they have turned out, due to the kind of instability in those institutions. The PSA are studying this kind of institutions so that we can understand why they behave, so that we can come up with solutions that are appropriate to the kind of situations that we're dealing with.
You've mentioned two very interesting points and two rabbit holes that we can go down. Before we go into this, I want to bring Zaid into the conversation, because the first of the rabbit holes you went us down was one around how do we attract the right skills into the public sector, particularly technology and digital are most likely to be within younger people, are most likely to be within people who are not career sector. And I'm interested in your perspective on how are we attracting those skills, and how public service is administered to create skills.
Yeah. No, excellent question. I think recognize that we probably are never going to be able to compete properly with the private sector for those top ends. But I think we also need to make certain decisions about what we want to develop, what we want to buy. And this is a key discussion that we need to have, particularly around SETA as well. There are things that probably don't make sense for government to start to build capability around. If I think about the data center and all of them that are required to keep a data center running, it probably doesn't make sense for us as government to start to create for young people to go into data center technologies, right? But if I think about those core items that affect our business of systems, this is an area where we are able to take young people in and develop them. But we must that they are going to leave for greener pastures. And I think this is just the nature of the place that we work. There are things that we can do and are being done at the moment. The issue that DG mentions around young people and the issues of experience, to make sure that we can get people to come into the system that, of course, don't have experience, and we don't expect them in the public sector. We'll be finding young people who are but because of a lack of posts in ICT, we find them working in supply chain, we find them working in system. And I come back to this issue of capacity, and I'll just quote you a number that we try to popularize in the, it's 0.3%. 0.3% refers to the 4,000 or less than 5,000 IT across 161 departments, developing solutions and supporting 1.2 million public servants. 3% are the IT people. That typically what happens when a solution is brought into government, it is given to these people, and they are told, go and make it work. And so you have some departments, I think it's the account for more than 50% of that number, the top 9. And we have, I think it's less than 3 people in IT. Now, if you're running a government department, whether national or provincial, less. That's including the manager, probably, the director, IT. Then how do you maintain, how do you do anything other than just kind of keep on swimming?
Yeah.
So I think it's the issue. I bring you back there because I think it's one of the areas that we need to deal with. And we need to talk about how do we then look at the talent million public servants, those young people that undoubtedly are there in the public service. How do we excite them about coming to work in ICT spaces? How do we create that capability to build the things that we want to talk to a SETA and talk to our partners to say, it makes sense for you as SETA to all of these infrastructure components. It really doesn't make sense for a national department to have 5 desktop and certainly 5 developers, absolutely.
You've expanded my mind. I'm awed by the 0.3% statistic. And I think if there is a key outcome, it's noting this number and noting the need for us to transform this space in order to deliver digital transformation. Also about, as you said, actually, you have some capacity that could be moved into these spaces to provide better support. How do we then create programs in government so that there is the right level of support, so that there's the right level of equipping? I've taken a note for that. Second of the rabbit holes is somewhat linked to what you're talking about, which is this idea of having procurement organizations sitting between government departments and the sort of the services you need in order to deliver on service delivery. Can we talk a little bit around how it would be different, particularly in order to enable digitally delivered services?
Okay, in the case of this organization, what we need is that, in my view, 1 is innovation, 2 is regulation or standard setting. Allow departments to go and procure on their own. I really do not believe it has worked in the procurement part as initially envisaged. In fact, it has intended consequences. And I think that at some point you may find that CSIR has more capacity than SETA in some respect. And when that happens, you ask yourself, what's the point? Maybe having more capacity to do things, to build, things. And I think that is the kind of that we need, an innovation partner for government, and a standard is setting, the law brings something called norms and standards that should be done by DPSA. But I think with us willing to work together, overcome such a Chinese wall divide, and have a well-streamlined SETA, a well-focused SETA. With reforming public institutions, it's also because when you do so, you can't retrench people. More complicated, and that is usually one of the issues that makes it difficult for us to information. But with retraining and all other forms of innovation, I wish to believe that the people can be accommodated, because you would remember that most of them came from defense and subs. Yes. And to ensure that when we shift to the new trajectory, no one loses, this is my view. Otherwise, if you don't address that issue up front, you are not likely to do anything.
That perspective, Zaid. So the
Yes.
idea of SETA becoming a regular standards and innovation. Your sense on that?
Yes and no. I think certainly there's a place for a central procurement agency. If we look at the model that's around, fully centralized model initially, and we look at the model that exists today, we find very much different, actually. So we do expenditure analysis on ICT. Is, I think, around 15% of total government IT expenditure from CETA. Meaning, departments are using transversal tenders of their ICT goods and services directly with vendors. So the numbers tell us a story. Look at the price that we pay. We've done some benchmarking around what we pay for devices in the public sector. The price is not the best price. So this model is not, the decentralized model of procurement for services probably needs to be relooked at. And so I think it makes sense for CETA to start to look at where departments, DG, if you need 10 laptops, it shouldn't take you more than a week to get those 10 laptops. There's a government list price. You can choose based on your standard that's been set by a CETA or by ourselves. And today, it probably takes you 6 months to do that, right? And that's for a device. When you start to want to build a system, 18 months to even longer.
Yeah.
We have examples where to buy a piece of software, a critical piece of software like anti, takes more than 2 years. So I think there's definitely some reform that's needed in the procurement space. The question comes back to, we have to making tactical decisions about what we want departments to own around, and what we want a state agency to own and create a capability around. What makes sense for us to join together, for us to leave as a core service of a department, for us to simply just buy as a commodity off a list from those that do it better than us and will forever do it better than us.
So synthesize, I was saying that, and I want to go back to a topic on service delivery in case you're walking in and wondering why we're talking about procurement in a conversation on service delivery. But what I'm hearing you say, Zaid, is that actually different government departments to enable digital transformation to improve service delivery, we've got to implement the technology that we need. To do that, we need a CETA that's reactive enough that we can quickly procure the technology services we need, given that we only have % of our public service able to implement systems. And to do that, we're looking at something like that circumvents a lot of the procurement challenges that are existing today in order to accelerate of critical digital capabilities that we need in order to do our job. So, on that note, I want to talk a little bit about agility and speed. And about one bottleneck space in terms of agility and speed. Do we think that procurement, we are, as government, structured in a way that allows us to and provide service digitally or not, or digitally enabled, in a way that of South Africa, and truly therefore gives a great citizen experience? Your sense and some of the side of this procurement bucket that we've just spoken about.
Look, I said earlier on that one of the big realities of our time is that government is overregulated. So if it continues to be this overregulated, it may act as a constraint to the use of technology, because you will then still need the paperwork and all those kind of things to be done. So what we need to do, and at a report on PPE corruption, did not help us. Instead of us innovating out of COVID, we found ourselves having to go back, to roll back that. And I've been sitting on the implementation of the SIU recommendations. And now when that happens, there is to increase the uptake of technology.
Yeah.
So we need to have that conversation on us to overcome those fears that many of us are having. Essential is certainly there for us to really we move forward. The problem with the PFMA is that we always talk in general terms and say now the PFMA makes to do certain things. But when you ask people which part of the PFMA is a problem that needs to change, very few point at sections of the PFMA that needs to do that. So there is a mentality in government that the PFMA is trained to innovation. But unfortunately, no one or very few people perhaps have come to indicate which aspects of the PFMA create the constraint. The last issue in terms of the review, in the discussion of the current procurement bill, there have been suggestions that opportunity to amend certain aspects of the CETA Act. So you use one act or process to amending the CETA Act to enable things to happen. It will take you another 3 years. So gauges that we need to look at so that the bottlenecks that are self-imposed can be dealt with in government. Lastly, the last two engagements between the MD of CETA, I'm not sure if it's and the new DG, have been welcomed by the directors general. There is a meeting of mind. That agreement in terms of the kind of innovation that we are talking about, a platform, will be. That's our concern, that if there is an agreement between CETA, DCDT, how long will it last? So that we don't have a situation whereby after the elections next year, we start from square. Biggest constraint that we have to overcome. And as the presidency, we are thinking of how do we protect good things? How do we protect good decisions? So that when we have new things that are good do not have to change. Because that's the biggest challenge in the public sector environment. Change whenever you have new leaders. So we'll make some proposals on how best we can protect that things must not change. But we'll have to do it in such a way that if you want to change, you have to motivate. Is it that you have to change? What has changed in the circumstances that necessitate? What are the implications on the money that we would have spent by the time you want to do that? So that when you go to cabinet and you want to change what the other minister was doing or the other DG was doing, you must be able to go through steps to have preferences, discretion of ministers and DGs being the basis of in government. So we are thinking, applying our mind on what we can recommend in that regard.
So you've mentioned decision making, you mentioned regulation, you mentioned stability as the factor and speed. Zaid, do you want to add to that from your perspective, including procurement, which we spoke about?
Well, I want to echo what the DG is indicating around the issue of legislation. And talk to somebody in the Treasury who was around when the PFMA was developed. And what he said, the PFA was never developed to be a big stick. And unfortunately today it's become a big public servants fearful. Fearful of what? Fearful of failing. And the premise of is built on taking risks. So we have this dichotomy. How do we take risks? Create an environment where we are allowed to do the right thing and fail and not lose our heads. I think this, and the solution is in the leadership. I mean, people like DG who understand the for digital transformation and the ability to influence other leaders in government. Because it's only through leadership just being dogged about needing that transformation that we're going to see it through. I can talk about innovation conference in Cape Town, public sector innovation conference, there was an example of a doctor, medical doctor, learned how to code and develop his own application to be able to deal with trauma in his hospital. His story is that he had to push through all of the rules and the barriers and teach himself how to. And it's so easy to stay in your box in the public service and say, I am director such and such. I'm director. So in order for me to innovate digitally, actually the request must go to director ICT.
Yeah.
And between my solution and my problem, and you're hoping that all of these things can come together. So I think it's a culture change. Of course, it's driven from the top, and I think we're doing well. From the DG's forum, there's an appetite for digital transformation. I think as a collective, practitioners, private sector, we need this messaging that says it's okay to take risks in the public sector. And that the legislation is not necessarily it's an enabler. And as DG says, it can be changed. It's man-made. Okay? And if there are clauses that are stopping, then we need to look at it.
And so adding to our bucket of this idea of how do we create an environment that enables innovation and the leadership that supports innovation in our organizations. Okay, I am going to wrap this up. Final thoughts, things you want to add around digital transformation enabling service delivery? Both of my panelists.
Okay, a quick comment from my side is that if we can agree ourselves who are here as representing if we can do everything you know, what the DG asks for, just that, we can get everyone busy. So I'm pleading that out of this, can we identify some quick way without requiring changes to legislation? And if you were to come with those things, that can you spearhead this thing? That people who are seated here, easier than, so from this, there is commitment to this to an extent that the DG in the presidency, who is also the head of the public, is leading this work on so that we can move faster. And at the cabinet level, the committee, so that you can deal with overlaps and interdependencies.
Yeah.
So you can say that there is political and administrative will to drive this out of what we currently have without any new allocation. Thank you.
And so I want to, this is a very practical action we can take. You're saying, let's identify our things that the DGs are asking for. Let's see how we can accelerate that to market and get the help we need to implement that. I know that one of the things we're doing as GovTech this year is making a list of the outcomes that we're accountable to implement before the next GovTech. And I am challenging the team, the note taking. This is one of the actions that we as a panel are committing to in order to act service delivery. Thank you. Zaid, do you want to add?
I think maybe the last message for me is around in public servants and how we can excite them. And I think us that find ourselves here in the know, responsibility for going back and exciting our colleagues about digital transformation. I think once we do that and get the message out there, I think we would have done a lot.
Yeah.
So I want to leave it.
I think the idea, again, it's an outcome that we're saying from GovTech, that we want to take the message out of the small set of practitioners of ICT to the broader really start to give a flavor of what digital transformation can do and the opportunities that it presents departments. And so I think that's also a clear takeaway that we can add to our outcomes. Thank you, Dr. It has been a pleasure having this discussion. Our moderator is coming up. I'm not sure if you have questions for the room or if we are moving forward.
In the interest of time, we're not going to be doing questions, and that's because of breakaway sessions and the different tracks that you've committed to in any conversations that you're supposed to be in the business presentations. But we also do at the afternoon tea break before everybody gets evening's proceedings. So thank you so much to Vari, and thank you so much to the gentleman on stage for discussion. With that said, ladies and gentlemen, we are now drawing to a close, and we are looking forward to seeing you tomorrow and more panel discussions, and also the networkings that we've seen happen throughout the day, and also that announcements. If you've just walked into the room, if you're missing a set of keys, I'll give you a clue. The car, that German manufactured car. So if you check in your pockets and there's something missing, please have a look. And if you can't find it or later, that that you are in the organizer's office or near the information, have a look. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Well done. It was such a pleasure.